In the early hours of August 31, 1888, a body was discovered in Whitechapel. Her name was Maria Nichols. She was 43 years old, homeless, poor, surviving one night at a time in London's East End. By sunrise, her death was already becoming something larger than a crime. But at that moment, there was no legend, no infamous name, no cultural myth. There was only violence in a narrow street, under gaslight and fog. Over the next 10 weeks, 4 more women would be murdered in the same district. Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. The police were uncertain whether all the killings were connected. The newspapers were not, and that difference would change history. London in 1888 was not just industrial. It was informational. Literacy had risen. Printing costs had fallen. Competition between newspapers was brutal. Publications fought daily for circulation. Headlines were weapons. Sensation was currency. The East End already carried a reputation for poverty and vice. Overcrowded housing, casual labor, women forced into sex work for survival. It was a district many middle-class Londoners preferred to imagine as dangerous and morally corrupt. When murders began there, editors recognized opportunity. A single killing is tragedy, a pattern is fear. A mysterious pattern is obsession. As more bodies appeared, newspapers began shaping the story into something coherent. Reports emphasized similarities. They suggested a calculating mind, a predator stalking the night. A single mastermind moving silently through the slums. The phrase "the Whitechapel murderer" appeared with increasing certainty, even as police remained cautious. Chaos was being simplified. The public does not tolerate randomness well. 5 separate acts of violence are unsettling, but ambiguous. One intelligent, taunting killer is terrifying, but understandable. Narrative is comforting, even when it is dark. Then came the turning point. On September 25, 1888, a letter arrived at the Central News Agency. It was written in red ink. It mocked the police. It promised further killings. It began, "Dear Boss." It ended with a signature. Jack the Ripper. The letter was forwarded to Scotland Yard. At first, it was not taken seriously. Authorities received many communications during high-profile investigations. Most were hoaxes, but within days, newspapers published it. And everything changed. Until that moment, the killer had no identity beyond geography. Now he had a name. Short, sharp, theatrical, Jack the Ripper. It sounded deliberate, personal, memorable. Whether the letter was written by the killer, a prankster, or even a journalist remains debated to this day. Many historians suspect it was a fabrication designed to fuel sales. But authenticity became irrelevant the moment it was printed. The name spread like wildfire. Headlines no longer referred to an unknown murderer in Whitechapel. They referred to Jack the Ripper. A character had been born. And characters travel farther than facts. After publication of the letter, newsrooms were flooded with hundreds of additional messages. Some claimed to be from the killer. Others offered theories. Many were clearly fake. Editors selected the most dramatic ones to publish. Illustrated newspapers depicted scenes of horror with artistic exaggeration. Engravings showed shadowy figures looming over victims. Readers were given imagery to match the name. The killer transformed from an unknown criminal into a mythic villain stalking through fog. The press did not invent the murders, but it amplified them, and amplification alters scale. The murders might have remained a localized tragedy confined to the East End. Instead, they became national theater. International newspapers picked up the story. The name crossed oceans, circulation numbers rose, fear sold. Meanwhile, Scotland Yard struggled under immense pressure. Whitechapel fell under overlapping jurisdictions between the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police. Communication was slower than headlines. Evidence handling was primitive by modern standards. Every investigative delay became front-page criticism. Every rumor became printed speculation. Crowds gathered at crime scenes. Vigilante groups formed to patrol the streets. The police were accused of incompetence. Editorials demanded immediate results. The investigation was no longer just a pursuit of a suspect. It was a performance under public scrutiny. And the narrative had already decided what kind of villain they were looking for. The idea of a brilliant, taunting, elusive mastermind narrowed perception. Alternative explanations struggled to gain traction because they were less dramatic. The killer was expected to fit the brand. Branding is powerful. It shapes expectation. It filters interpretation. Once the name Jack the Ripper entered public consciousness, every subsequent development was interpreted through that lens. Even the famous From Hell letter, which accompanied half a preserved kidney sent to a vigilante leader, was absorbed into the mythology. Whether authentic or not, it reinforced the persona of a calculating monster who toyed with authorities. By the time Mary Jane Kelly was murdered in November 1888, the hysteria had peaked. And then, suddenly, the killing stopped. No arrest, no confession, no definitive suspect. The predator who had dominated headlines simply vanished. But the story did not. In fact, it became stronger. Most unsolved crimes fade with time. Without closure, attention drifts. Memory softens. Jack the Ripper did the opposite. Books were written within years. Suspects were proposed. Doctors, lawyers, members of royalty, artists, foreigners, conspiracy theories flourished. The mystery became self-sustaining. Why? Because the press had already done something irreversible. It had transformed a series of murders into an archetype, the faceless genius killer, the taunting letter writer, the shadow in the fog. That image was portable. It could be retold, adapted, commercialized. The victims' names became secondary. The killer's name became immortal. We remembered Jack the Ripper. We struggle to remember Maria Nichols. That imbalance is not an accident of history. It is the result of narrative construction. Repetition creates permanence. Newspapers printed the name daily for weeks. Other papers repeated it. Foreign publications echoed it. The name became shorthand for horror, and once embedded, it never left. More than a century later, documentaries, books, tour, museums, and online forums continue to dissect the mystery. Entire industries exist around speculation. But speculation itself is sustained by branding. Without the name, there is no hook. Without the hook, there is no industry. The late 19th century marked the birth of mass media culture. Cheap print, rising literacy, and fierce competition created incentives that favored sensation over restraint. The Ripper case was one of the first major crimes to unfold under those conditions. It was not just reported, it was shaped. This does not require a grand conspiracy. No secret meeting of editors deciding to invent a monster. It requires something simpler: incentives. Fear increased readership. Dramatic framing increased fear. Publishing the letter increased drama. Once the name existed, removing it would have reduced impact. So it remained. The killer may have sought anonymity. The press ensured he would never receive it. Today, the mechanisms look different but feel familiar. News spreads instantly. Algorithms amplify outrage. Viral headlines circulate globally within minutes. Suspects trend before trials begin. We live in an attention economy. So did Victorian London. The technology changed. The incentives did not. Jack the Ripper was not the first serial killer in history, but he may have been the first fully mediated one. The first whose identity was constructed and broadcast in real time by mass press culture. The first whose myth overshadowed his crimes. 5 women died in Whitechapel in 1888. Their lives were shaped by poverty and neglect long before their deaths. Their killer was never identified, but the name signed at the bottom of a letter became immortal. Maybe the letter was authentic. Maybe it was written by someone chasing profit. We may never know. What we do know is this: without the press, there is no legend. Without publication, there is no brand. Without repetition, there is no immortality. The murders created fear. The newspapers created Jack the Ripper. And once created, he could never disappear.